On the 1st of August 1944, the Warsaw Uprising broke out. At his situation conference in the early hours of the 2nd of August 1944, Hitler ordered it to be put down and the city razed to the ground, sparing no one. This order was passed to Heinrich Himmler. To this end, Himmler flew to Poznań, then called Posen, the very same day. His mission was to try to put together a force capable of doing this. With the Soviets only a few kilometres from the Polish capital and the German army in headlong retreat, there were few troops to be spared. The head of the SS and police for the Warthegau, a province annexed to Nazi Germany after the conquest of Poland, was Heinz Reinefarth. He was put in command of police units which were to be reinforced by renegade units made up of former Red Army soldiers who had gone over to the Nazis. 2 of these units were immediately available. The unit of Oskar Dirlewanger was made up of former criminals who had been put in uniform and was at Lyck, today Elk. The unit of Bogdan Kaminski was reforming near Guben. Both of these units could be quickly put on a train and sent to Warsaw. Both of these units had a terrible reputation gained in fighting partisans in the swamps and forests of what is today Western Russia and Belarus, although in truth they were not fighting partisans, just killing innocent civilians. The plan was to punch a hole through the lines of the Polish Home Army in order to link up with German forces which were cut off in the centre of Warsaw and, at the same time, force a communications corridor to the bridges over the Vistula River. Heinz Reinefarth had no military experience, although, due to his actions as a non-commissioned officer and junior officer in the French campaign of 1940, was considered a good soldier. As the higher SS and police leader, his priority would have been against the civilian population, whilst leaving Wehrmacht forces to take on the hard job of fighting the Polish Home Army. The first district in the sight of the Nazi machinery was the working-class industrial district of Wola. Here, Dirlewanger's unit above all was responsible for carrying out Hitler's order to kill everyone. And Dirlewanger carried this out to the letter. Thousands of people were killed. The bodies of the dead were left lying around to decompose in the summer heat. When the uprising broke out, SS Obergruppenführer Erich von den Bach-Zelewski was at the Grand Hotel in Sopot. He was ordered to report to Warsaw and take charge. Previously, in what is today Belarus, he had headed anti-partisan operations which had resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of civilians, most of whom had nothing to do with the partisans. He knew Dirlewanger and Kaminski very well. It was possibly on his orders that the decision was made to burn the bodies, fearing an outbreak of an epidemic, and perhaps also driven by the desire to erase the traces of the massacre. A special Sonderkommando was required to burn the bodies. The commando that made up the incineration unit, the Verbrennungskommando, consisted of men from the Wola district who had been captured and otherwise would have been murdered. The Nazis had been mass burning their victims since the spring of 1942 and had even set up a special unit called Sonderkommando 1005 to burn those bodies. I've done a separate video on this and there's a link below. In Warsaw, the incineration unit included about 100 Polish men who were probably reinforced as needed by grabbing civilian prisoners. The Germans promised them that their lives would be spared in exchange for work cleaning up and burning the bodies. The prisoners were also informed that as from now they were subject only to the Gestapo and the SS, and that they had the right to refuse to obey orders, even if those orders came from a German general in another branch of the armed forces. This is ulica Sokołowska in the Wola district of Warsaw. With the exception of the church, the buildings you see here were not there in 1944. All the buildings were destroyed. The building which is opposite the Church of St. Wojtek had previously held Soviet prisoners of war. Polish prisoners assigned to work on burning corpses were kept in rooms on the third floor separately from other groups of slave labourers. Their food and other daily requirements such as cigarettes, spare clothing and cleaning products came from the empty properties in Wola, the inhabitants of which were probably dead. Being a member of this unit did not, however, stop Dirlewanger's unit, amongst others, using them as human shields while attacking insurgent positions. Very few members of the incineration unit survived, and those that did survive were not making notes, therefore accounts differ. The Verbrennungskommando was divided into two subgroups, each with around 50 people, which operated respectively along ulica Wolska and ulica Gorchewska. These were the two main arteries leading to the Vistula River. Each group appears to have been guarded by 15 to 20 SS men. A Pole who could speak German was appointed capo in order to translate and pass on the instructions of the SS. The commander may have been an SS officer named Neumann. According to witness testimony, one of the groups appears to have been commanded by SS Obersturmführer Thischke, who could have been a lawyer and a landowner. I'm unable to provide any more information on these people, and I've checked the list of SS Obersturmführers, and there's no one with the name of Thischke, so presumably it was something similar. Franciszek Zasada was 46 years old when he was forced into the incineration unit. He testified after the war thus: both groups were formed into a commando for burning corpses. On the 7th of August, the groups were taken outside, ordered to undress, and wearing only trousers, herded down ulica Sokołowska towards Wolska, where we were put to work burning bodies. At ulica Wolska 21, we found the bodies of around 100 men executed by shooting. We burned them on the spot. At ulica Wolska 85, in the farm tools and machinery store, we found some 300 corpses wearing priests' robes and 80 others clad in civilian clothes. All these people had been shot. We burned them there. On the same side, but a few houses down the road, at ulica Wolska 21, we came across around 50 bodies of men, all shot. Many of them wore bandages. At ulica Wolska 60, on the premises of the pasta manufacturing plant, in the middle of the courtyard, we found a pile of bodies 2 meters high, 20 meters long and 50 meters high. They were mostly men, only some of them were female and children's corpses. It took us many hours to burn the pile, which could have counted 2,000 bodies more or less. While we were busy burning them, a Gestapo officer, a man of middle height with 3 stars on the collar, blonde hair and tanned complexion, brought from the street a few men dressed in civilian clothes and shot them at once. We burned their bodies with the rest. On the corner of ulica Płocka, our group was ordered to sit down, and then one of the Gestapo men told us that we would be spared in return for burning the bodies. We entered the Ursus factory by a large gate in ulica Wolska. The courtyard, all the way from the gate to the recess in ulica Skierniewicka, was covered with bodies of men, women and children. There could have been 5,000 of them. In the evening, at ulica Wolska 47, 49 and 54, we collected smaller numbers of corpses. From number 47, around 100 bodies. From 49, 3 that we found in a pit full of water. The next day, we worked in ulica Wolska, collecting smaller numbers of bodies from the entrances to several houses. I think that this gives a very good account of what was happening, and this went on for days. The bodies were collected together, formed into a pile, alternating layers of wood, gasoline was poured on top of them and they were set on fire. Franciszek Zasada's testimony shows that his group alone, operating in the area of Ulica Wolskie, burned around 30,000 corpses on at least 30 pyres. In his memoirs entitled Warschau Verbrennungskommando, Tadeusz Klimaszewski described it thus: disgust, pity, hatred, fear, all of it combined into a heavy vapour that clouded the brains. Initially we were looking for the best, least mutilated, most human corpses, but later it didn't matter. Hands unprotected, we could no longer choose the better ones. We were tearing at crusty clothes and grabbing damaged limbs. Swarms of frightened flies, buzzing angrily and furious at the interrupted feast, attacked our sweaty bodies, settling on the lips and pushing towards the eyes. The torment was further increased by the increasing heat. Just don't give up. Don't let yourself be pushed down into this bloody, rotting corpses at any cost. Perhaps chance will show us a way out. Today, tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow. This is the former Venezia Park and Playground area. Anti-aircraft ditches had been dug here, and this now served as the location of dumping the ashes of the dead. Those that wanted the bodies destroyed saw this as having priority over anti-aircraft protection. Members of the Verbrennungskommando were ordered to burn the identification documents that they found on the bodies. They were to give all the valuables to the SS men. Failure to obey this order was punishable by death. One imagines that the SS supervisors kept the looted property for themselves. Dirlewanger, for example, went to great lengths to ensure that his property of stolen goods was safe at Esslingen near Stuttgart in April 1945. He had taken all of this to his parents' house. They didn't just bury Poles. Tadeusz Klimaszewski recalled that when there were no German witnesses in the area, the SS ordered the prisoners to burn the bodies of the fallen Germans, along with their identification and documents, thus disrespecting the Wehrmacht soldiers who had fallen in battle. Members of the Verbrennungskommando were obliged to report to the Germans about every case of encountering Poles in hiding. Failure to comply with this order could result in death. One survivor, Miniszewski, testified that Neumann once shot a prisoner when it turned out that he was Jewish. Thischka ordered the shooting of a prisoner nicknamed the Engineer when he had a nervous breakdown and refused to continue burning corpses. Members of the Verbrennungskommando often witnessed the SS men supervising their murdering Poles they accidentally encountered. The victims were usually residents of the Wola district, hiding in deserted buildings, or people who were pulled out of columns of refugees driven to one of the transit camps. Mieczysław Miniszewski testified that Neumann shot several dozen civilians, including women, for absolutely no reason at all. He also twice witnessed an SS man named Müller ordering the shooting of groups of civilians numbering about 20 people each, selected from the columns of people being taken out of Warsaw. The bodies of such victims were burned by the Verbrennungskommando. Once the work of destroying the bodies in the Wola district was complete, the incineration unit followed the advance of the German forces into the centre of Warsaw. Amongst other locations, they collected the bodies of the murder victims killed in Hala Mirowska, in the ruins of the National Opera, and in the Saxon Garden. At the beginning of September, the commando found itself in the Old Town, where it burned the bodies of dead and murdered Poles, including victims of the massacre committed by the Germans in insurgent hospitals. The Verbrennungskommando also operated in Powiśle and Marienstadt, by this time only a few hundred meters from the Soviet lines. The Church of St. Wojtek is located directly in front of the building where the incineration unit was held. Thousands of inhabitants of Wola were imprisoned here in horrendous circumstances given the lack of access to food and toilets. On or after the 2nd of September 1944, Franciszek Zasada recalled carrying water to people imprisoned there. Members of incineration squads, whether it be the Sonderkommando in the death camps or Sonderkommando 1005, which was destroying the evidence of Nazi crimes across Eastern Europe, were always murdered once the job was completed. The incineration unit in Warsaw was no exception to this rule. The Verbrennungskommando operated at least until mid-September 1944. Where they were killed is not known. However, some managed to escape to tell the tale. On the 23rd of August 1944, Tadeusz Klimaszewski and 2 others were ordered to search the area around Plac Teatralny. Possibly, owing to the presence of the insurgents in the area, they were not guarded closely. They were thus able to escape to areas held by the Home Army. Franciszek Zasada and Mieczysław Gutkowski managed to get out of Warsaw to the transit camp in Pruszków because they paid a bribe to a German. They had found some gold rubles next to a corpse, and they gave this to him. Mieczysław Miniewski managed to escape from Warsaw with the assistance of a German non-commissioned officer. The testimony of one of the surviving members of the Verbrennungskommando was written down before the end of the war, and then included in the publication Zbrodnie niemieckie w Warszawie, German Crimes in Warsaw in 1944, which was published in 1946. After the war, 4 other members of the commando gave testimony before the District Commission for the Investigation of German Crimes in Warsaw, which was published in 1961. Tadeusz Klimaszewski wrote his memoirs entitled Verbrennungskommando Warschau, published for the first time in 1959. These testimonies and accounts are really valuable because that's the only information that we have got relating to the destruction of the corpses of the victims of the mass killings. The remains that could be found of the victims were transported to the cemetery of the uprising located next to the Wola cemetery. Thanks to a recent project, the names of tens of thousands of victims have been found and are today commemorated on posts as one walks westwards towards the cemetery. No one involved with the burning of the bodies was ever brought to trial.